Right. Morning, everybody. We're just going to introduce ourselves, and then I'm going to do my bit, and then Kurt's going to do his bit. But I have to say, sorry, I must turn this on. Can you hear me? I have to say it's not often I'm asked to speak more. Usually it's the other way around. So today's a bit of an exception. I'm Malcolm Jones. I head up the Learning and Research Services team, which is basically subject librarians, e-learning advisors, and metadata, cataloguing, acquisitions team. You'll see I'm the librarian. So I head that up within the newly converged service. Effectively, that's our library and our IT groups joined together about 2 years ago and working together across a sort of converged setup. I'm responsible at that sort of more senior level for coordinating those research activities, but I don't know that much about IT. So essentially, I rely on colleagues, I brought one with me, to help us sort of develop those sorts of services. But my view is we join it all up and present something a little more coherent, and I'll talk about that in a wee while. I'm also the institutional repository manager. How's that for bad karma? A librarian. I've been working in libraries since 1980, which my children tell me is like the early Cretaceous period in terms of human development. Good.
Thanks, Malcolm. Yeah, so I'm Kurt Weideling. I'm the head of research at Research IT at the University of Manchester. Just on the subject of timings, there is another option, which is we could finish early enough for me to watch Australia kick off its World Cup campaign at 4:30. I'm just putting that out there. That is another option for us to consider. I just hope there's some South Africans in the room that we can talk to about rugby later. So Research IT at Manchester, well, up until March this year, I was the Director of IT Services at Monash University. I'm going to principally be talking about the University of Manchester. However, I will share some information about Monash. Some of you may be familiar with Monash. It's a university that's actually a little bit larger than University of Manchester, which is a surprise to some people, given that Manchester is the largest single-site university in the UK. At Manchester, I manage the newly created Research IT group, which is responsible for delivering specialised IT platforms and capabilities in support of the university research agenda. One of the things I will talk about in my presentation is that it's about research IT, not IT for researchers, which is a subtle distinction, but I hope one that makes sense to you. I certainly hope it does when I explain it. And I'm a social scientist, so you've got a librarian and a social scientist talking to you about research IT, so bear with us. You know, we can recognise computers. We do understand what the internet is, so we should still be able to talk to you in some depth about the journeys our institutions have been on in terms of implementing a research IT approach and the sort of pitfalls and the successes and failures we've had along the way. So back to you, Malcolm.
Thank you. Okay, a little bit of organisational context. Edinburgh Napier, based in Edinburgh, fairly obviously. About 18,000 students, 5,000 students overseas, an awful lot in Hong Kong, China, etc. Do you remember that sketch with the two Ronnies and John Cleese? Tall, I'm getting feedback. Tall, middle-sized and small? No? Yeah, I'm getting, yeah, good. I feel a bit like Ronnie Corbett. I really need a flat cap and a muffler because when I went away to sort of do a little bit of research and sort of find out about how Manchester was, when I realised I was doing a presentation with Kurt, I sort of noted some differentials, as you probably imagine. We have £112 million income. I won't spoil Kurt's slides, but it's considerably more than that for Manchester. And 4.5 million research income, which is really sort of pretty tiny. Like a good librarian, I did go away and sort of look up all these details, and my colleagues say I was frothing at the mouth a wee bit, looked like I was chewing on an Alka-Seltzer, because I realised exactly how much the difference is between a well-established research university and someone like ourselves that have always supported research, but not in a very focused way, perhaps. We have a £2 million non-pay budget for information services, and that covers all areas. So that's library databases, information databases, as well as software stuff. There are other pots of money to fund the bigger developments, but £2 million non-pay budget for the whole of the converged service. We previously concentrated on teaching and learning, so we're not research intensive, research informed, or whatever the current phrase might be. But we have got new ambitions. And it is about improving things like research-teaching linkages. It's about doing more theoretical research as well as very business-oriented research, which is where actually we were at previously. Key research areas, there's just a few there: transport, engineering, health, etc. And in REF 2014, just to sort of let you know where we were, we only submitted 100 staff across 9 units of assessment. As you can see from the slide, 53% were 3-star or 4-star, which put us about 89th overall in the sort of league table. So that's who's talking to you in a sense. We were 109th in 2008, so we are moving in the right direction. In general terms, research IT, we do the basics, and we do them, we think, fairly well. We move data, we secure it, we provide a lot of storage for it. We have a big job convincing people that university systems are the places to actually store and manipulate data, rather than a series of sort of other out-of-house systems. Does that ring any bells with anybody? That sort of level of advocacy is a sort of ongoing thing for us. Our general demands, we think, are not that big, and they're not that different from probably everybody else in the room. They're not very varied, but to be honest, we don't know. We're doing an awful lot about research data management at the moment, putting in systems in place, and we don't know what data is out there. Our newly established research office doesn't really know what data is out there. So it's about trying to pull that sort of stuff together and understand it, and then provide systems for sort of dealing with it and supporting the researchers themselves. We've got a few sort of significant new developments. We've got a new research management system. We've just signed up with WorkTribe, and that's for a complete solution, if you like, the front end of the research cycle, right through to sort of post-award research outputs, etc. We've also got, we're setting up, or finalising, I should say, an RDM system, Research Data Management System. We're using Archivum, spot the deliberate typo, or not deliberate typo. There shouldn't be an H in Archivum, so my apologies to Archivum. And basically using their appliances locally, but we have a hosted repository with ePrints in Southampton. Okay. And we're working on more collaborative tools generally, so that researchers can collaborate and do the sorts of things they need to do. So what's driving our research at the moment? Again, 2 years ago we got a new principle. And as autumn follows summer, a new principle means a new strategy. In my experience, that tends to be diametrically opposed to the previous strategy, which means you do a fair little bit of lurching. It's like when a new government comes in. The new strategy basically says by 2020, this is what we'll do. We'll double the REF submitted staff. So we'll submit about 200 people to REF. That's the idea. We'll double the number of people who actually hold grants, 16% to 40%. And we'll double the value of research grants, up to about 9 million. Still pretty small beans, but does buy a lot of ice cream. We have a new research director, who was previously Professor of Computing. That was an interesting one for me personally. That research director was very keen on a particular system to do with repository stuff, effectively a rival system. And we used to have some heated discussions over the years. So when she was appointed as research director, I have to say, oops, I didn't see that coming. I perhaps would have been a wee bit more tactful in my approach previously. But I'm still employed, so, you know, hanging on by a thread. There's also a new Research and Innovation Office, which has just been set up. We used to have one years ago, but under the previous regime, it was sort of scattered between finance and HR and various different elements. And now it's being pulled together. It's called RIO, Research and Innovation Office. So it's a big part of what I have to do is to build relationships with that new unit, work with them closely to sort of make sure that we know what's going on and that we're supporting it properly, and to know what we're supporting. It's about not treading on toes, but I have to say it's not really about turf wars at all. It's just about moving in the same direction and not sort of tripping over each other. It's just making sense. Yeah? Familiar sort of thing. New school focus. We used to have research institutes, and their whole raison d'etre was really, about making money. It was about working with business to actually go out there and do very vocationally, industry specific research and bring money in. We just got rid of a whole faculty level of sort of administration, and those research institutes effectively have moved into our academic schools. Now that's really good for us in information services because we have good relationships with the schools. We've got subject librarians, we've got a range of other people who are used to talking to schools. Trying to get a handle on research institutes that didn't really need our sort of information or our sort of support was always a challenge for us. But this is new. This has only happened since the 1st of August. So all those people in the schools are finding their feet, not quite knowing what they want. And obviously we've got a lot of people who are doing research for the first time, which again is another sort of big challenge for us. To help us with that, the recruitment policy of academic staff is much more research oriented than it ever was. Basically, you know, PhDs were not standard for new people coming in, and now they very much are more like that. And also, a real game changer is research, and research activity is very much a key to academic promotion. And that has led to a fair amount of disgruntlement across the piece at the moment. Okay, key challenges. I've hinted at some of these already. The culture's changing in our institution. It's very much about, it's not really from a standing start, but it's very much about sort of people adjusting to new expectations. So a lot of academics, and I'll come on to it later, are suddenly having to do stuff they haven't done before. And they've been very good at what they've been doing before. And to suddenly change that is quite a challenge for them, and they need our support. The rate of change, scale, the ambition of it, although it's still small in general terms, it's a big change for us. Okay. There's a lot of changes to do with REF, to do open access was mentioned, a whole lot of sort of changes from outside, technological changes, etc. One of the issues for us is, do we really know what's out there and what's coming? You know, we don't want to be taken by surprise. We've got to get a lot better at actually horizon scanning and seeing what's going on. And again, that's pretty new for us, I suppose. Budget. I'm always going to moan about budget. There's never enough. We have pretty good IT systems, I have to say. We've got very good IT systems. I have to say that because my colleague from IT is down there. But it's true. We're generally pretty pleased about our budget. But it's about ongoing investment, as I'm sure you all know. We always have to keep pushing to keep those systems up to date, up to scratch. We have to convince other people, fairly obviously. And when a lot of money is going towards supporting research in other areas, again, it's a challenge for us to actually make sure that that money is wisely invested in IT systems that enable us to support that level of research. IT and other systems, I should say. So a lot of expectations going on and a lot of fears. I mentioned already some old dogs are learning new tricks. A lot of very experienced academics are suddenly having to do research. And many of them don't want to sort of show that they don't know a lot about how to go about doing research. So again, as part of that culture change, but it's a challenge for us keying into them. And we have to exploit the relationships that we already have with a lot of those people. I put new dogs with high but hard to predict expectations. I started to think maybe this dog analogy wasn't really going anywhere. I was going to put cool cats, but I thought that might be over-egging the pudding a little bit. We've also got to develop our own research skill set. Just a few months ago, I went to talk to our IT infrastructure people, really to explain what I knew about the research cycle, because it was new to them. Why did they need to do what they were doing? How did it fit in? So, you know, I spent an hour talking about that with them, and then they sat me down and explained about the IT infrastructure, which my memory of it is lots of boxes with wires, and, you know, on the diagram, and that was about it. So all the way around, myself included, got a lot of sort of new skills to learn. All our library staff in a converged service have to know a lot more about IT support than they've ever done before, and vice versa. And there is a sort of challenge around researcher freedom. I put freedom in inverted commas because, to me, it's not really freedom. We have to play a game, really, about treading a line between allowing academics, researchers to get on and do their research, but at the same time emphasizing and providing the tools so that they can use centralized tools properly that will give them the security, give them the backup, etc. Again, I'm sure this is all familiar to yourselves. At Napier, We need to build a better research community. We're a multi-site institution. Now we've gone from 3 faculties to 6 schools. It's even more challenging. And my particular flag that I wave is about joining up the variety of services, right through from basic IT support, right through to things like open access, advocacy, right through to the sort of typical librarian type support, literature searching, mediated searching, advice on metrics, etc., etc. Our approach is pretty basic. Have we got something already that would do the job? Is there something on the market that we can buy? To actually go and develop something and build it, we're not set up to do that, really. And therefore, we try not to. It's very much a last resort for us. What we're trying to avoid is separate systems maintained by separate IT teams in separate schools. And I think that's a real threat. In the same way as a librarian, I'm always fighting off little separate libraries everywhere. We have to make sure that our IT systems are holistic and global in nature. We're trying to put those in now, but the key of it is talking to our researchers and actually finding out what their needs are and what they want. What do they need? If we don't understand research fully and properly yet, we have to make sure we're not putting in systems that sit there, look lovely, we're very pleased with them, but no one uses them. The interface might be terrible, or whatever it might be, or they simply don't meet the need. I've mentioned the structures that apply. Excuse me. RIO, our research office, the schools, the skill sets that we need, and the processes. We've got a lot of stuff to do about pushing our DM systems out to people and explaining what they do and why they need to do it. The same with open access, the same with the research management system. We've never had to define them that closely before because they weren't really in that great demand. But now we do, because if we don't get it right, then we fall foul of the criteria that are out there from EPSRC, etc. It's my final slide. Next steps. Fairly obvious again, I think. We have to set up the research management system. That means a new repository that feeds to websites, staff profiles, all the rest of it. Giving something to the researchers that they want very much, and they don't have at Napier at the moment. We need to, I should say, finalise the RDM system and all the processes that relate to it, which again need to be properly communicated to staff who really aren't that interested. We need to support experienced academics who are new to research and target the new ones who are coming in. But the key for me is the sort of last bit really. That's joining up our research support offer across IT and library. It's to do with the whole range from system, storage, security, what have you, right through to ref support, open access, repository management, digital literacy development. We do an awful lot of that. Metrics, impact factors, you name it. If we can get people coming to us or we go out to people at need, then we want to be in a situation where we can not pass them on to others, but we can add value to that interaction by putting them in the right way of knowing about other aspects of the service we support. So from my point of view, as a non-technical person and as a librarian, it's really about the communication. And I think some of those sorts of things will be picked up by Kurt as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. So we'll start with a little bit of organisational context about Manchester. When I was reflecting on some of the things that Malcolm was talking about, and the fact that Manchester's got research all sorted out, which is an interesting hypothesis. One of the things that occurs to me is that I'm actually quite jealous of institutions where the library and IT sit within the same organisational structure. And the reason I say that is because I think if you were to start an organisation, purely greenfields, with the mission of a university, you would probably, maybe not definitely, but you'd probably conclude that library and IT are sort of just different manifestations of the same thing. How do you manage information properly? How do you access information? How do you leverage information? Of course, if we were to try such a thing at Manchester, it would lead to an environment not dissimilar to the current geopolitical situation in the Middle East, I think you guys know what I mean, and that the chances of, at an established university, actually saying the library and IT, you guys are part of the same organisation, probably not high, probably not something you'd really want to do. But I do think logically, if you were starting afresh, that's exactly what you would do. So when I hear about organisations like Edinburgh and Napier, I'm actually a little bit jealous of that because I think it makes a great deal of sense. So let's talk about Manchester. Some of you will know this information. 40,000 plus students. That's equivalent full-time. 5,000 or so plus academic staff with a research focus. I won't say researchers, as you would all know. There are plenty of academics who do some research, some teaching and the like, but certainly 5,000 or so plus staff with a research focus. Around 3,800 postgraduate research students, 26 academic schools, 100 plus specialist research groups and institutions, approaching £900 million annual income, external research funding around $300 million. And we have 5 research beacons addressing global inequalities, advanced materials, cancer, energy, and industrial biotechnology. Now, when you see those research beacons, you probably think, well, that's really handy, Kurt, because it must help you to develop and deliver your strategy because you've got these clear areas of focus that the university has in its research. And I will say that no, it doesn't help. And the reason it doesn't necessarily help is because, like so much of what passes for strategy at a university, this is a wish list rather than a strategy. And that might seem a little bit disparaging to my institution. I don't mean it that way. But most of what people think is a strategy at a university is not a strategy. It is a wish list. It is a set of aspirational goals, things that we think sound nice that we would like to do. And it's great to have aspirational goals and it's great to have a wish list. Doesn't equal a strategy. Manchester's my second higher education job. Monash was my first. Before that, I worked in a number of different corporate environments. And corporate environments, for all their failings, do tend to have a clear idea of what strategy is, and strategy is about what specific outcomes do you wish to achieve, what capabilities do you need in order to deliver those outcomes, and therefore what do you need to do to build those capabilities. That's a real struggle for us at Manchester, and that we have aspirational research goals, and we need to translate those into something that is a meaningful IT strategy, which is not always easy. Anyway, pretty big, pretty complicated place. Compared to my experience at Monash, Monash is a little bit bigger. Revenue about the same. I think it was about 1.6, 1.7 billion Australian, which I would say is equivalent to 880 million pounds, which is probably worth quite a bit less now that the Aussie dollar is in free fall. Similar size, a little bit bigger in terms of students, but similar research intensity. And it's been interesting to see some of the different approaches, and I'll try and pick those out and highlight those to you as we go through. So that's a bit about the university. We did have 4 faculties. We're moving to 3 faculties, which is in itself interesting because at Monash we had a larger number of smaller faculties. And it makes engaging with the academic community quite interesting that we've got such a big university and we now have only 3 faculties. So engaging with the faculty level, you're still a long way from where the rubber hits the road. And we're finding that certainly to be a challenge, and that we go and have these really interesting discussions with, the faculty research directors, and it's just joining those dots and trying to get that information to percolate down to the schools, and the literally hundreds of specialist research groups and institutions is a real challenge. It's a real challenge, and not one we've cracked so far. So strategic alignment. This is a slide I pulled from another strategy deck I'm using internally. What is the university's research objective or research strategy? It's written here. It's to be one of the world's top universities. We were recognised for our interdisciplinary research, for training outstanding researchers. And I like this last one, giving parity of esteem to discovery, application, knowledge transfer and impact, which is good. And it, for me, as a head of research IT, it gives me something to work with. And that we talk a lot about research impact. How do we maximise research impact? How do we allow our researchers to collaborate effectively in order to leverage their research and their information to create impact? So it's not just about the act of discovery, it's about the act of leveraging that discovery. What is our research IT value proposition? Or as I like to say, this is what I say to my team, this is hopefully why we don't all get sacked to save the university a few million pounds. We provide the specialised e-research capabilities. E-research, I know, is not a term that's used extensively here in the UK. It is used more in other parts of the world to help university. I don't like e-science because it makes people think, well, so it's about the hard sciences. I don't like e-infrastructure because straight away I'm thinking about boxes and networks. E-research is about the specialised capability that help University of Manchester researchers realise their aspirations and undertake world-leading high-impact research, eliminating barriers, increasing research productivity and continuously expanding what's possible in academic research. What does that mean in terms of some specific strategic objectives? We're not down to the level of deliverables here. We're talking about a few key focus areas, and it's what is here on the screen. Enhancing research outcomes, improving research impact, accelerating research productivity, and expanding what's possible, which is a pretty broad collection of things we're trying to achieve. But it's the nature of the university. There are many competing priorities. There are many desires. There are many organisational sort of aspirations. And these are the four sort of key research IT strategic objectives that we believe will maximise the chances of the university achieving its research goals, which incidentally are to be one of the world's top research institutions. We're at the moment, I think, ranked in the high 30s, low 40s. I can't remember exactly where, depending on which scale we use, or which of the ranking systems we use. There is an objective to be, up there with the Harvards and the Oxbridges and whatnot. I do have a slide that I won't have here, but I sort of showed to stakeholders and I showed to my team, which shows the different logos of Harvard and Cambridge and Yale and Stanford and these people. And the instant we start having a conversation about, well, Kurt, what I'm really concerned about is that I used to have a guy who was across the corridor and he used to do my sysadmin work, and I think that's what we need to do to achieve our research impact and achieve our research objectives. I simply pose the question, do you think that's the conversation that Stanford are having about their research IT? Do you think that's the conversation that Harvard are having about their research IT? And the answer is, of course, yeah, they probably are. But the point I'm making, and it's a rhetorical point, it's not the conversation we need to be having. If we are serious as a university, and we claim to be, we are serious about talking about world's top 10, top 15 or so research institutions, we cannot spread our resources around the university doing lots of little sysadmin sort of infrastructure support roles. That will not help us get there, which can be an unpopular message, but nevertheless it's an important one. So that's our strategic alignment. So that's what we're doing in Research IT. So this is the what. This is our future state service portfolio. So what do we actually do in Research IT? We do some of this now. We're working on some of it. So this is future state. Data collection and management, which is about research and metadata capture, data storage, data archiving, virtual machine infrastructure. Certainly research data management at Manchester is a joint initiative between ourselves and the library, so we are partners in that. It is not exclusively my group. The library is the organisation where the rubber hits the road when it comes to research data management. They're the ones providing that end-user support to researchers to do data management plans. But my group are a key player in delivering the infrastructure and delivering a lot of the projects, and Mary is going to talk in a little while about her role in delivering some of that. Mary's part of my group. Platforms for computation. So we're talking about data-intensive, high-throughput computing, computationally intensive, high-performance computing, and platforms for data visualization. So that's a key focus area for us as well. And we have some platforms that already do that. We have some plans to develop those. Applications for analysis, specialized data analytics and data visualization apps, systems for collaboration and enabling services, research software and data engineering, specialised application support, training and consulting. I've used the term sort of specialised application support and specialised data and specialised visualisation. What I mean by that in practice is that we are in the process of narrowing down the range of technologies and applications we support into a bit of a tiered model where we say, what are the applications that most of the university needs, most of the university researchers need to do their research on a day-to-day basis, and those are the applications we're going to focus our support in, as opposed to what we do at the moment. What we have traditionally done is sort of a headcount model where we say, that guy, he's out there or she's out there doing lots of stuff for that research institution, some of which is ordering desktops, some of which is higher-end research IT work. We're going to get away from that model and say, here are the core set of research applications and technologies that this university needs to achieve our research goals, and really focus in our training on that, our consulting on that, and the like. So that's what our portfolio looks like. As I said, we do some of all of this right now, but we don't do all of what we want to do. So that's our sort of 2B state. So setting up the research IT function. What's been involved there? Strategy. I've talked to you a little bit about strategy. We've defined our IT strategy and critical success factors are part of a broader ITS approach. What makes this situation even more interesting is that ITS at the University of Manchester is itself going through a major change program, and the creation of the Research IT group is part of that change program. Recognition that Research IT is indeed a strategic priority for the organisation. So that's sort of, we've got a couple of moving pieces there. We've got an ITS strategy that's changing, and we're developing a Research IT strategy to sort of sit within that. We've established, I say a strong governance model, that's probably me being a bit optimistic. We have established a governance model. Our intent is for it to be a strong governance model, but that's a work in progress in terms of getting that group of researchers. So we have a Research IT governance group which consists of around 15 or so researchers drawn from across the university, drawn from all faculties, not all schools. We didn't set it up to be a sort of democratically representative body where each school gets a vote on the governance group, but rather we set it up to be broadly representative, to have some early career researchers as well as the really serious heavy hitters. The key challenge there is convincing that group that they are not there to represent their own specific interests. They are there collectively to represent the interests of the university to drive Research IT forward and to make those key decisions. So that's a real challenge. Another challenge there is, one of the things I also always say to people about strategy, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this concept, strategy is as much about what you don't do as what you do do. Again, strategy at universities tends to be aspirational wish lists. A bunch of good stuff. And you look at it and go, that is a really nice list of things we probably should do. Pick 4 of 8. That's where the interesting discussion happens, and that's not something that institutionally we're necessarily particularly good at. The way we typically approach it in IT at Manchester is we have our list of 100 things that people want to do. We take it away and we do our best to kludge our way through as much of it as we can, and we do a good job on 10 of them, and we do an average job at 20, and we do a rubbish job on the other 70, but that's the way the institution has expected us to work. So, key objective for this group is to not think like that anymore, to think like a group that has to make those sort of key prioritisation decisions. So organisation, what have we done from an organisational perspective? We've merged several infrastructure and application teams from our 4, soon to be 3 faculties. We have approximately 25 staff at the moment. We have an ambition to grow that number. The current team structure is we have a team of research software and data engineers, an application support team, an external services team, and an infrastructure team. That will change at some point, but that's the sort of structure we have at the moment. What are the services? I've talked to you about our service portfolio, our 2B service portfolio. Platform and application offerings currently under review to determine appropriate 2B architecture and support model. So we're doing a lot of work on that at the moment. We've got some of it locked down. Platforms of computational intensive research. We're getting fairly close to locking down our 2B model and how we're going to get there. We haven't got there with the rest of it. Partner platform network. This is a sort of an interesting one that some of you may find interesting. One of the things I was bewildered by, and I do quite literally say bewildered, was the sheer array of HPC facilities and platforms and systems that are in this country that people are touting to be used. Which is a sort of good thing, and perhaps it's not so good a thing. It says we haven't necessarily got our infrastructure investment quite right. The way in which our researchers typically use and leverage these systems at the moment, and I'm not talking about the N8 HPC, which we do a better job of. I'm talking about everything that's down the road at the Hartree Centre and the like down the road from Manchester. It typically, if you know a guy, you get to use these platforms. If you don't know a guy, then you probably don't even know it exists. And I'm only slightly overstating it when I say it's really down to the quality of the personal relationships. Now, personal relationships are very important in academia. We don't want to undermine those. But what we are in the process of doing is establishing a more formal partnership. Now, I probably shouldn't use partnership because it infers a legal status that isn't actually here. But so we can clearly say to University of Manchester researchers, here are the facilities in this country, in Europe, globally, that you can use. This is what they do. This is what they're good for. This is the technical support that's available. This is the training that's available. And at the moment, we don't do that in any sort of consistent or systematic way. Perhaps some of you guys already solved that problem, in which case, fantastic. But there is really so much capability out there for us to leverage that we are not doing an adequate job of leveraging at the moment, and I'm really keen for us to improve that. And processes. This is something that Malcolm talked about. I suppose, drew a picture of a spectrum from the IT that needs to be really stable and the like, and our introduction as well, talked about the need for certain systems that are very stable and the like, and research systems which are a little bit more, well, not a little bit more, but much more dynamic, specialised. So what we've done is we've established a governance model, a project and work governance model, using these three nicknames, and these are just nicknames for the sandpit, the hothouse, and the engine room. You probably work out what that means. So we categorise all of our work in research IT against one of these categories. So the sandpit is, we've got a research software engineer out there working on a research project. They're embedded. They're doing something that's highly bespoke, highly customised, highly esoteric, really doesn't impact the infrastructure of the university, is not something that is likely to be reused. It is being done in order to achieve a specific research outcome. The way in which we govern that is very loose. We sort of track what's going on. We keep broad control of what deliverables are coming out of it, so we understand if there is likely to be a broader institutional impact. But for the most part, it's a very, very loose governance model. Then we have the hothouse. The hothouse is something that is being done in an agile and experimental and innovative way, but is nevertheless likely, or at least potentially, going to have a cross-institutional impact. Perhaps it's a proof of concept that we might then want to extend to some other research groups. We run that in a project-like way, but we have agreement with our PMO that we are not running it with the full project overhead, so we don't have to have all of the project deliverables, and we don't have to have a PM producing monthly project reports and the like. We do track it. We run it in a project-like way. We have objectives. We try to actually finish it at some point, but nevertheless, we adopt a more agile-like approach. A real challenge here is, a lot of people at university say, well, we need to be very agile. What they actually mean is we'd really just not we'd like to have no control over anything that we do, if that's okay, please. That's what people often mean by agile when they're not really familiar with agile development. That's what the hothouse is. It's something that might have an institutional impact. It is actually building something, but we're doing it in a sort of agile-like way. And then finally, the engine room, you probably work out what's coming here. This is about a system that has impact across the university. We're building a platform or bringing in a platform that is going to be utilised across multiple research groups and the like, and therefore it needs to be governed in a project fashion. We need to have a proper plan. We need to have a business case for the investment and all of those good project deliverables. Now, this is a little bit of a shock for some of my staff who the sort of perspective was previously, I'm sorry, we're research IT, don't worry about us, we're just going to go off and do our skunk works over here. We've had to say, well, that's fine for certain deliverables, but not for all deliverables. So I don't like this position, well, research IT is different, so just you guys go over here and do whatever you like. You're not, you don't have to follow the rules of corporate IT. It really comes down to, what's the impact of this piece of work you're producing? Is it something that is, you are building a system that is then going to have an impact across the institution, in which case, well, you know what? If you're going to ask for £500,000 to spend on it, you better have a decent business case, and you better have a project plan, and you better govern it appropriately, and you better manage your risks. So that's the sort of processes, the governance processes we've implemented. And that's been an interesting process, but a useful one. So there's some of the key focus areas in terms of that we've done setting up the research IT function. Measuring success, I won't take you through all of this, other than to say, this is, so whilst I don't completely agree with the management saying if you can't measure something you can't manage, well, I do think there's an element of truth in it. And these are the key objectives we have, or the target outcomes. Ensuring you have the right mix of services to meet researcher requirements and that we enable usage effectively. Ensuring our services help the university achieve its strategic objectives. Ensuring our services are designed and supported in a way that makes them highly usable. And ensuring our research software and data engineering practices staffed with highly skilled people who are sought after by researchers. This is not being locked down. These are a few indicative targets we have and how we're likely to measure them. But those are some of the target outcomes that we actually want to be able to measure in some semi-tangible fashion. So it's around the right mix of services, that they achieve our strategic objectives, that they're usable across a broad spectrum of the university, and that our research software and data engineers have got the right mix of skills so they have high utilisation. So that's measuring success. And key challenges. Mary and I on the train up, and we were talking about something or other. And I was saying, whenever anyone talks to me about how brilliantly everything is going, I draw one of two possible conclusions. Either A, that person is lying to me, or B, that person is a fool. They're the only two possible explanations if you tell me that everything in your area is going well. And that might seem a little bit harsh, but I do think there's an element of truth in that, because we all know that we work in a complex, changing space, and that there are some things that work well, some things that are, and some things that are a bit of a disaster. So I'm not going to talk about any disasters. We'll keep those under the cupboard for now. But I'm going to talk about some of the challenges, some of the difficulties we had, how we're going about them. I'll try and draw a few references, and I know I said I'd give a few more Monash examples, and I haven't necessarily done that. But I'll try and pinpoint a few of those as well here. So key challenges. Staff culture. Now, specifically what I mean about staff culture is that we want to create IT professionals rather than would-be academics. One of my key stakeholders has a saying, or something he says fairly brutally: I want first-rate research IT professionals, not second-rate academics. We have a lot of people working in research IT who are would-be academics. And I don't say that as an insult. I certainly don't say it as an insult to academics. But I am not interested in having a team who are motivated by trying to get themselves cited on papers and working in what they deem to be an exciting or fascinating academic area. Those are nice things. I want people who are committed to delivering high-quality e-research platforms, capabilities and services to help academics achieve those academic outcomes. That is a cultural challenge. Particularly when you are in the market for recruiting for people with PhDs in computer science. But it's something that I mean quite sincerely, and I do think can be an issue in our space, and that it's not necessarily a good idea to employ a bunch of people who would prefer to be academics, but in lieu of that, they've decided to become research IT professionals. So that's one challenge that we are working on. How did we deal with that at Monash? To an extent, what we did at Monash was we accepted that within a certain sector of our research IT professionals. So we had a group that was similar to the research software and data engineering group, and we did indeed embed staff for extended periods in particular areas, you know, whether it be the biological sciences or electrical engineering or whatever, and they had some deep expertise in that area. However, we did that as a way of managing this problem rather than solving the problem. And to be honest, we'll be doing the same thing at Manchester. There will be some staff who really are only employable in specific narrow academic areas, and clearly we want to leverage their skills, but what we can't have is a situation where that represents the majority of the body of our staff. At least that's my position. You guys may have a completely different view, and happy to hear about it. Research IT, not IT for researchers. This is my number one challenge. I haven't got this solved yet. We are not a bunch of people who go around trying to deal with all of the IT needs that researchers have. I need a specialised desktop, and I need this sort of research management system, and oh, well, we need this sort of AV technology in our spaces and the like. That is not what we do, right? Or rather, it's not what we want to do, more accurately. We do research IT. We do that service portfolio that I spoke about. That's what we focus on. We focus on those technologies and capabilities that will enable the university to deliver its strategic research goals, not a bunch of heads that can be put into research groups to do all of their IT in accordance with an IT concierge model, which you guys might be familiar with, but it's a term that, you know, I've heard used. I've used it myself. It's this notion that what we need from IT is we need John O and Sue, and we need them here, so I can just go to them and say, fix my IT, Sue, and she'll take care of it. Right? That is not going to help the university become one of the world's leading research universities, and it's a real key challenge for us. So research IT, not IT for researchers. And that's a challenge for me within ITS. I constantly have people come to me and say, oh, Kurt, I need you to get involved in your group, to get involved in this bit of research admin software because you guys are research IT. I say, yeah, no, not us. Go and speak to someone else. And I've had to take a pretty hard line on that and explain, we are research IT, we are not IT for researchers. Again, I accept, incidentally, that's a contestable point. Some of you may have a different view on that, but that's certainly the position I've taken. And it was certainly the position we took at Monash as well. We actually created a group, the Monash E-Research Centre, that was headed up by an academic that did not all of what my group does, but a big chunk of it, particularly in infrastructure applications and research software engineering space. And that group was very, very clearly focused on specialised e-research capabilities, not providing a bunch of people to help out researchers who just want some IT staff on hand to deal with all their complexity. Okay? Again, I accept that is a contestable view. Some of you will have different views, but that's certainly the position I've taken at Manchester. Research IT, not IT for researchers. If you remember nothing from my presentation but one thing, remember that I talked about research IT, not IT for researchers. Bimodal IT, some of you will be familiar with this. I think it's a Gartnerism. I think Gartner came up with this. Well, actually, probably being Gartner, they probably stole it from someone who marketed it. So bimodal IT. So how do you have an organisation that is capable of delivering the engine room that needs high reliability, high robustness, high control, and the hothouse and the sandpit, which is that agile, innovative approach to IT? Because, you know what, culturally those two things are not the same. You have to put a lot of rigour into and processes and governance into running robust IT systems. And short of splitting your IT group into two separate entities, which I don't think is a really good solution, that's a real challenge. So that's a challenge for us as well. And it was a challenge at Monash, and we hadn't solved it at Monash. It's an ongoing process. It's making people aware, I think. Part of it is simply making people aware of these things and the like. The Google toothbrush test, some of you might have heard of this, the Google toothbrush test, when Google acquire things, when they go and spend, $25 billion US on a startup, they apply the Google toothbrush test. And the toothbrush test is this thing useful to the vast majority of the world's population at least once or twice a day to solve a particular problem, which you'd like to think is what a toothbrush does. And we sort of apply a similar version of the Google toothbrush test to our research applications. Is what we're doing going to be useful to the majority of University of Manchester researchers on a regular basis, maybe not once or twice a day, but on a regular basis, to solve a particular problem, to help them achieve a particular research outcome? If the answer is no, then we need to have a discussion about it. That doesn't mean we don't do highly specialised, high-performance computing. We do. And, you can imagine there's a great deal of need for this sort of thing at University of Manchester. But the point is we don't just do that. And when we do it, we have a strong emphasis, or an increasingly strong emphasis on engagement and usability. We did a bit of a market segmentation when I joined the group back in April to try and segment our researchers. Those are familiar with any sort of market segmentation, a nice 2x2 matrix. And we concluded we've got a group at the top left who have highly specialised, highly demanding technical needs for their research, but are also relatively self-enabled. We do a pretty good job of supporting them. There's maybe 1 or 2 dozen up there. Top right, we had a group of people who need a more in-depth relationship with research IT, but also have similarly complex needs. There's maybe 100 to 200 of those people we support. And as we went through this market segmentation and tried to work out who do we actually support in this university, we came to the conclusion, loosely, that there's maybe 20 to 30 researchers at the university we support really effectively. There's maybe another 100 that we support sort of so-so. And there's another, 5,300 and something that they wouldn't even know us if they tripped over us in the street. They literally don't know that research IT exists, which is a terrible situation to be in because it says that we're not leveraging our capabilities effectively and we're not helping the university achieve that sort of broad research impact. So, HPC, not just for the elite. It is for the elite. It is for the rock stars, but it's not just for the rock stars. Looking at our technologies, looking at the analytical applications we are deploying, we want to deploy, do they pass that toothbrush test of being universally or at least broadly applicable to our research community on a regular basis? Collaboration. It's another slightly controversial position I'll take. Again, coming from outside of higher education, I've been both impressed and bothered by the amount of time people spend trying to collaborate with other institutions. Impressed because it's a great thing to do, right? We want to collaborate and we want to help each other, and we're doing that now. Slightly bothered because a lot of that collaboration is without focus and without apparent purpose, with no specific outcomes. In the private sector, when we collaborate with potentially competitors in order to achieve a particular outcome that we define as a win-win. Now, because we're publicly funded, we have to take a slightly different approach to that. I recognise that. But one of the things I've said to my team is if we are going to be going around talking to other universities, we're talking to those universities with a purpose. What are we specifically collaborating on? What is the outcome we wish to achieve? What's the win-win we're looking for? As opposed to having a conversation because someone defines that's politically desirable for us to be seen to be having a conversation. Again, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, except if it's pulling you away from other objectives and outcomes that you need to achieve. And again, that's a challenge we have. I think there's a lot of people who, again, with their would-be academic hat on, think that their role is to spend a huge amount of time talking to other universities and looking for opportunities to collaborate, as opposed to starting from the position that says, I have an outcome I wish to achieve, and I think that institution is probably looking to achieve a similar outcome, and maybe we can work together for a win-win, which is great if it's got a purpose and it's got an outcome there. Again, at Monash, how did we solve that? It was actually easier at Monash because Australia, you know, we're a big country that's really empty, so we didn't actually have many other institutions to collaborate with. In Australia, we have the Group of 8, some of you might be familiar with. It's the 8 research-intensive universities, Monash, Melbourne, UNSW, Sydney, UQ, Adelaide, and UWA and ANU. And so really, it was actually kind of simple. You know, we never talked to Melbourne. We couldn't talk to the guys at Melbourne. You know, our lives depended on. We'd collaborate. No, that's not entirely true, but we'd collaborate with UNSW, we'd collaborate with UQ, we'd collaborate with ANU, and it was really interesting because you get some really nice, neat, focused collaborations as opposed to these really, really big groups that have 101 different competing requirements and objectives, where collaboration just becomes a bit of I believe, a bit of an amorphous concept that's detached from the actual achievement of meaningful outcomes. Next steps for us. Have I killed enough time, do you think? Should we? All right, we're good? Okay. Next steps, I'll go through these fairly quickly. Significant communications focus to increase awareness of capabilities across the research community. That's an ongoing challenge for us, a big challenge for us. Being able to reach a community of 7,500 researchers and PGRs is really tough. You know, it's really, really complicated, and those of you from big, diverse universities will share this challenge. But big emphasis for us. Application and platform architectures and roadmaps under development, as I mentioned. Big push to expand our research software and data engineering practice, to really grow that, to make it somewhat self-funding with a sort of transparent funding model, charge-out model. To get away, incidentally, I should have put this in the challenges slide, it's to get away from people thinking, I want Bob or I want Sue, that's my research project. I'm putting in a bid to have Bob come and work for me. You know, move people away from that and say, no, what you're putting in a bid for is to have a research software engineer work for you, and here's the charge-out rate of X £100 a day that you need to factor into your research grant. Now, I know there's some administrative challenges to that, by the way, I understand that, but quite often, incidentally, in this organisation, in this environment, we have this challenge whereby we run up against administrative hurdles regarding funding that leads us to suboptimal outcomes, in my opinion. Improve usability, big push on usability. One of our key stakeholders says if the command line is the answer, you're asking the wrong question. Okay, we love the command line. Well, actually we don't, I can't stand it, but a lot of people love the command line, a lot of engineers love the command line. We have a generation of researchers, even in computationally intensive fields, such as computational biology and chemistry and the like, who are simply not familiar with how to do research, starting from the position of a command line prompt. And if that's what we're requiring of our researchers, we're going about it wrong. We've got to have options that are far more usable and require far less sort of intensive technical training and skills. I mentioned transparent funding models for platform and service access. Training review, that's something else that we're undergoing at the moment. Outcome is to be determined, but it'll be a more focused training offering. Again, you know, you can imagine leveraging new types of delivering training online and the like, as opposed to having to get everyone into a classroom. E-research capabilities for data science. So data science is a big push at the university. The digital humanities is a big push at the university. Digital humanities is not the sole thing that's leading us to focus on usability, but you can imagine that it is a key factor. It's saying e-research is not just about high-performance computing for a few elite researchers. It's also about how do we help researchers in the humanities better manage digital content pertaining, for example, to cultural objects. So there's a few of the next steps. All right, so that concludes my presentation. So Malcolm and I are happy to take any questions you might have now.